Lex Luger's WCW run is filled with memorable moments that showcase his evolution as a wrestler and a character. In this video, we'll review 3 standout matches that defined his career, his battles against Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan, and an unforgettable tag match alongside Sting against the Steiner Brothers. These matches highlight Luger's strengths, his chemistry with legendary opponents, and his undeniable star power in the WCW landscape. Welcome back to Ring Chronicles. Glenn, what made you pick Lex Luger in this series of WCW stars?
Well, we've been on this thing where we're talking about WCW stars that also had successful WWE careers.
Right.
Asking the question, did WCW make these superstars? Mm-hmm. Now, I don't think anybody's going to argue that WCW did not make Lex Luger. However, I thought it might be useful to compare his WCW run with the WWE and putting a focus on the WCW run, since that's what we've been doing. You know, Luger, he was successful in both companies, but what was his WCW run like and what was his WWE run like? Now, here's the odd thing about this. I started watching wrestling pretty heavily in 1993, even though I saw it here and there before then. When I started watching wrestling, Luger was actually into WWF. And so my first impressions of Lex Luger were in the WWF. However, he would later go back to WCW. He had a career in WCW before the WWF. I think both of them are memorable careers, so I wanted to focus on both of those.
All right, so the first match we'll get into is 1988 Starrcade against Ric Flair. Some of the things I saw about this match, this was the best carry match of all time, meaning Ric Flair carry Luger. So you want to address that first and before we get into the match?
Well, first I want to address one thing.
Okay.
Some people might say this was not a WCW match. Here's the thing. This was right in the middle of a transition period from Jim Crockett Promotions into WCW. I mean, it wasn't like snap your fingers and this was done. So this was the NWA. There's NWA aprons around the ring. However, Starrcade 88 was produced by WCW. Shortly thereafter, it basically would become WCW. So I would argue this is the first WCW Starrcade, even though it had NWA aprons around the ring and it was still in transition. There was probably some legal mumbo jumbo. Now, addressing the carry. Okay, first of all, if you fought Ric Flair in the 80s, you probably got carried. Okay, he was the best wrestler in the world, bar none. I would argue Ric Flair might be the best wrestler of all time. Lex Luger's green at this point in his career. For people that don't know the wrestling jargon, that means not a veteran. He's not extremely experienced. However, he held his own. Notably in the match, he was doing a lot of power wrestling, which was more common in the WWF at that point, which would later become WWE. Any of these matches that we're going to be showing clips of or photos of can be witnessed on Peacock, by the way. And this one's on Peacock. Yes, Ric Flair carried Lex Luger in the match. Was it the greatest carry of all time? No, that's a huge exaggeration. Whoever said that was wildly exaggerated. You know, they said it was the greatest carry of all time to produce Lex Luger's best match of his career. Was it Lex Luger's best match of his career? Possibly, yeah. I mean, I think you can make that argument. Did Ric Flair carry? Yes. But I think Lex Luger did a good job in the match. And he was dominant through the majority of the match. Now, of course, that relied on Ric Flair selling and registering. Interestingly, if you listen to the commentary, Jim Ross uses the word registering. People didn't know what that term was, but Jim Ross let it slip out. He mentioned registering. For those that don't know what registering is, it's like if I punch Lance in the face, his head is going to go back. That's registering. It's to make it look like I really punched him. And then selling would be, ow, my jaw hurts. You know, that's the difference. So Ric Flair was doing a great job selling and registering. Lex Luger was dominant throughout most of the match. You know, when I hear carry, I think of Shawn Michaels versus Ric Flair in his retirement match, where Ric Flair was way past his prime and Shawn Michaels was pulling out all the stops to make this match better than it ever should have been. If you look at Ric Flair's later career, he did a good job of towards the end of improving his physical shape and putting on better matches. But Shawn Michaels completely carried Flair in that match. I don't think Lex Luger was completely carried by Ric Flair in this match. He held his own. Of course, he depended on Ric Flair to make this into a quality match and a great match. And I think we got to give Flair that credit. But it helped put Lex Luger on the map. It established him as a star. And I'll get into the comparisons with him and Hulk Hogan at the very end. Next match, SuperBrawl, the first one, Steiner Brothers versus Sting and Luger. I hated the finish of this match. Nikita Koloff interfered, hits Sting with chains, and caused him to get busted open. But I think the match was great. It was, if you look at the Meltzer ratings, I don't think Meltzer had a NWA WCW bias. He rated matches pretty highly compared to what if it was in the WWE, he would have gave it like 2 stars. But I think he gave it like 4.5 or something. I think it's notable to look at that match and look at how over the Steiners were. I mean, they were going against Lex Luger and Sting, and the Steiners were getting huge pops. And I think that just goes to show you how WCW and the NWA treated tag team wrestling back then. If you were a tag team wrestler, you were considered a specialist in your field. And the WWE, it's not like that. You could have the greatest tag team in the world, but if they're going against Roman Reigns and The Rock, they're going to lose because it's Roman Reigns and The Rock. The Steiner Brothers were considered tag team specialists, and they were over. This match was so over. The fans were divided. Sting did a lot of stuff that you didn't see back then, like an over-the-top rope dive to the outside floor. This was Sting, implementing a lot of things that you didn't see too often in wrestling back then. Lex Luger, of course, doing the power maneuvers and facing against 2 other guys that also could do same kind of wrestling, very strong guys. Great match. You need to watch it. 93-94. Lex Luger goes to the WWF, which is now the WWE. And I'm just going to run through this very quickly, okay? So notable things that happen with Luger. First, he starts off as a narcissist. He's a heel, and then he gets repackaged as the All-American. He was the one to slam Yokozuna on the deck of the USS Intrepid on July 4th of 1993. That led to a match at SummerSlam in 1993. Lex Luger won the match by countout. WWE did not feel like Luger was getting the pop that he deserved or needed to carry the company. And I think Luger, throughout his whole entire career, was always packaged and marketed as an alternative to Hulk Hogan. So in the NWA, WCW days, he was their answer to Hulk Hogan. I mean, he's a big, muscular, blonde-haired guy, but younger. You go into the WWE, Hogan leaves in the middle of 93. His last match was at King of the Ring, unless he had some other obligation that I can't recall. But his last, big match was at 1993 at the King of the Ring against Yokozuna. And so with Hogan leaving, they had to have somebody else come in, be the big guy. And they were trying to make that Lex Luger. So they were trying to make him the next Hogan. Hulk Hogan, he would carry the American flag. He was, all about America. So we're going to do the same thing to Luger. We're going to make him all about America. And we're going to put him in this ridiculous flag-themed outfit. And we're going to do the Lex Express with the bus and everything. He won the match by countout at SummerSlam 93. Then the 94 Royal Rumble would happen. I know later years they would say that there's never been, I think it was Michael Cole, I can't remember, who said that there had never been 2 people win the Royal Rumble at the same time. That's not true. Lex Luger and Bret Hart both won the Royal Rumble. Their feet hit the ground at the same time. And because of that, they did this weird thing at WrestleMania 10 where there was a match between Bret Hart and Owen Hart, and then a match between Lex Luger and Yokozuna. And then the winner of that match would fight against Bret Hart later in the night. And, there's a lot of stuff I can say about that, Owen Hart being Bret and all that. Luger lost the match due to disqualification. Mr. Perfect was the referee. Lex Luger pushed him when he was upset about not doing a count because he was distracted by Jim Cornette and Mr. Fuji. And Lex Luger was disqualified. And that's pretty much it. We wouldn't see Lex Luger doing much in WWE after that. And he didn't win the title. He didn't go to fight Bret. None of that happened. So, of course, later on, Lex Luger would make his unexpected return to WCW on the very first Nitro. By 1997, he was a WCW guy in the era of the NWO. And he fought Hollywood Hogan on August the 4th of 1997 on an episode of Nitro. Lance, do you remember when, world titles would change hands on, regular cable television?
Yes.
Those are interesting times, weren't they?
Yeah, I mean, this was when I first started watching wrestling. I just thought it was normal, and then it became not normal.
Yeah, this was not normal, okay? In the history of professional wrestling, this kind of thing didn't normally happen, especially in the early 90s. You might see a television title change hands on TV, something like that. Everything, starting in the 80s, and especially in the 90s, the WCW and the WWE started adding more and more pay-per-views left and right. Soon we had pay-per-views every month, and In Your House and Spring Stampede and all this other stuff started coming out. It was a painful time to be a wrestling fan financially. But this match was on Nitro. The WCW needed a win at this point. When I say WCW, I'm speaking kayfabe, in that it was a separate organization from the NWO, and WCW desperately needed to win. Lex Luger, despite multiple interferences from the NWO, was able to put Hollywood Hogan in the torture rack and cause Hollywood Hogan to submit. The match was very interesting to me because Luger was facing the guy that he was always in the shadow of, and he beat him on Nitro, of all things. And so I would say it was his most historic match and had the most significance in his career, although unfortunately he never reached that pinnacle again in his career. I would say it was the pinnacle of his career. Skill-wise, he was at the best that he could be. You know, he was a veteran. It wasn't like he was against Ric Flair and Green in the ring and everything. He held his own against Hogan. He didn't look like he was being carried or anything like that. Darn good match. But I wouldn't say it was good as the other two that I mentioned with WCW, but it was more historic in my opinion. So Lex Luger wins the World Heavyweight Championship, which is an accomplishment that he achieved in WCW, more than once, but never in the WWE. So yes, definitely WCW made Lex Luger into a star. WWE tried to make him into one on their side, and he achieved some success. Winning the Royal Rumble is nothing to sneeze at, but he didn't quite make it to the top like they were wanting him to. He just wasn't as over. But in WCW, for whatever reason, he was able to get over. And he was able to get over enough to beat Hollywood Hogan, who was the biggest heel in the company. During the prime of the NWO angle, it was a major accomplishment. I think it was, also very fitting that it was Hogan that would be the one that he would beat, given the fact that he was constantly compared to Hogan throughout his career. Lance, did you get a chance to watch any of these matches?
Yeah, so I watched them all today. I didn't watch Lex Luger's early career, but I do think that 97 match with Hogan on Nitro was the peak of his career.
Yeah.
Not just because of the championship win, but because of the circumstances and the story around it. It was a big deal. You remember WCW fans would throw trash in the ring.
Yeah.
They started throwing trash in the ring when the NWO started interfering.
Yeah.
And they were having to wrestle with trash in the ring. Lex Luger looked really strong in that match because he fought off all those guys.
Yeah.
They made him look awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. He fought off the whole NWO. He gets the win, and then all the WCW guys, the whole locker room came out and to celebrate with him. And it was a big moment. So I don't see how Lex Luger could have had a bigger moment than that.
And it was a weird time in wrestling where the WCW faction would have heels and faces within its own faction, but when it came to time to fight the NWO, they were all faces at that point. So
right.
The WCW locker room opens up, spills out, everybody comes out. It's a memory and it's footage that's often replayed in wrestling, with Luger being celebrated by the WCW locker room for winning the match. It was, and then Tony Schiavone finished it up by saying basically WCW is coming back. So it was part of this grander storyline that's taking place where NWO has been just beating up WCW guys left and right and just pummeling them and just dominating them. And now we have a WCW guy with the world championship. That Lex Luger brought the world championship back to WCW, even though it's all WCW. The NWO is part of WCW, but we're talking about the angle here that was taking place. I would say that there's only 2 times during the NWO angle that WCW got that big of a boost. One being when Sting won the title, although we all hate that ending of the match, and then 1998 Goldberg, which also Goldberg won the belt on Nitro. Once again, a time where belts were won and lost on Nitro.
A funny moment that I caught at the end of the match when all the WCW guys came out to celebrate. Lex Luger leaves Dean Malenko hanging. Dean Malenko goes to bro out with him. He's like, "Good job, man." Then Lex Luger just turns around and walks away.
Oh my gosh.
I don't think he saw it, but it
That's funny. I didn't notice that.
That's got to be his biggest moment. It was on their flagship show against Hogan, the storyline of WCW's failing kayfabe, and he comes up with a victory. He fights off the whole NWO. It was great booking.